Our webinar today is going to be focused mostly on a conversation because coaching is about sharing a conversation. And what I will be doing is giving you an opportunity to stop at any time to speak with me or to answer questions. So I notice that you cannot see me. I'm not quite sure why, but that's okay. We will continue to talk and dialogue. I also wanted to just make sure that the chat is available. So I'm going to okay, so you can see me. Excellent. All right. So I am going to send a message here to everyone and say welcome and tell us a little bit about where you're signing in from. Okay, so where are you located? Okay, so I am signing in from Winnipeg and we are on Treaty One land. And I see some of you are in Victoria, Alberta, BC, different parts of out west. So, Germany. Okay. So welcome here. Today is a great time to have this conversation as we look at what's happening in the landscape, as we can view what's happening globally. We know that conflicts are on a rise. We know that after all these years, we seem quite unable to resolve conflicts. So today I want to spend some time with you talking about conflict resolution. But one of the things I want you to know is you can stop at any time. You can ask me questions. You can put your questions in the chat. We also have the Q&A, so put your questions up there. What I'm going to do is pause during so we can dialogue because conflict resolution is a process of dialogue. It doesn't happen instantly. It's something that you have to talk about. We have to exchange. And so just want to welcome you here to our conversation. Again, my name is Joyce Odidison. If you are not connected with me, find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me. This is what you're going to be looking at when we connect, and we can continue the conversation there if you have further questions about conflict. I want to invite you to think about what you're going to learn today and to set an intention for your learning. One of the things I love to do after teaching for many, many years and continue to do so is I like to invite my learners to be intentional about your learning. So think about a conflict that may be brewing, something that is happening, a situation that you're unhappy about or you're not quite feeling comfortable with. And I invite you to take the tools that I'll be sharing today and add them to your toolkit so you'll be able to apply them in your learning, and go ahead and ask direct questions to me in the chat and in the Q&A if you have a specific conflict that you're going to. I was going to do a poll, but I didn't want to just give you stuff and have you just respond. I actually want you to be very intentional about the situations that you're facing. And then, of course, hey, there's a Winnipegger. Hi, Manitobans. And so take that time to see where you're going to go with that particular conflict situation, because conflict is a catalyst for change. And as you think about how you're going to apply your learning, plan for using that information in that particular situation, and then how you might use it in future situation. I have been resolving conflicts in my business, interpersonal wellness services, for 27 years. And it's surprising that we still see many conflicts occurring. But what's most surprising, because conflict is a natural part of human relation, we are going to have disagreements, we are going to have a competition for scarce resources because we're humans. And in my book on Hurt, Upset, Angry, Frustrated, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, I've added one chapter called The Brain and Conflict. And one of the things to remember is that the way our brains are designed is that we are always going to look to care for ourselves, to have the best, to be well taken care of. And then when that doesn't happen, or if someone else gets that best seats, so you're going to the theater and you're going to look at, wow, I want the best seat. Oh, that seat looks really good, but somebody else is thinking the same thing and they've gone and got the seat, and you feel that little pang. Oh, yeah, and that's just part of the human interaction and human engagement that we are going to involve ourselves in. And it's different when we come to our workplaces, because a number of things could occur at work. You could be because you're working from caregivers. You could be caregivers in a hospital. You could be caregivers working within the families at home. You could be caregivers working with in an institution or in a facility. So you could be caregivers at home for your own family members. So it's important to recognize that conflicts in our workplaces are going to be different. They're going to be varied. They're going to be diverse. And not all conflicts will be the same. Therefore, all our responses cannot be the same. So it's very important for us to sort of identify the types of conflicts. So what I'm going to have you do in the chat is to tell me, what are some kinds of conflicts you encounter on a daily basis at work? So for instance, you would put categories with my boss, conflict with boss, with client, with family members. Like, what kind of conflicts do you face? So let's get a range of conflicts in the chat, and we'll pull from those in our dialogue, in our, okay, so conflict with direct reports, that's one from Natalie. People complaining about each other and their co-workers. Oh boy, wouldn't we be rich if we had a penny every time that happened? Yes, conflicts between staff, clients, and care workers, staff conflict with upper management. And you ask yourself, will this ever go away? Actually, the short answer is no. It will never go away, because we are humans, and humans are very diverse. We have diverse needs, we have diverse perspective, we have diverse interests. And I see conflict between the organizations, the family, and clients. Yes. So make all of these conflicts, I want you to notice a pattern. It is where needs and interests are not meeting each other, right? There is a collision. There is something in the way of meeting the needs and interests of both parties. So one party may be interested in feeling good about caregiving. The other party may be interested in providing good quality care. The other party may be interested in providing safety. So whatever they are, whatever the situations are, you're going to see the different types of conflicts. So we have ongoing conflict between two staff. This has been ongoing, and I'll tell you, in my work, at times I'm called in to do mediation between people who've been in conflict for 10 and 15 years. The worst was the 20-year-old conflict that I was called in to resolve. And in all of these situations, there are some commonalities, and I'll be sharing a couple of things with you today. These are some of the areas we're going to cover. And as I said, I won't be doing a lot. You won't be seeing tons and tons of slides going over, because conflict is such an interactive dialogue. When we do conflict resolution, if you were in a classroom with me, we would look at different scenarios. We would pull them out, and we're going to unpack them. But there are some core conflict skills and conflict awareness tools that I'll be sharing with you. So first of all, we're going to ask ourselves, what is conflict? Really, what is conflict? Well, conflict is a competition for scarce resources, meaning there is competing needs and interest. My needs and interests are competing with yours. And they are also a catalyst for change. There are opportunities for us to say something needs to change, especially with systems conflict, because I go into organizations and do systems conflict where there are departmental conflicts, where there are issues happening in the system. And that tells us that maybe we're overloaded, our system is overloaded, maybe we need more staffing, maybe we need to we need different policies and procedures. So we go in and we do a conflict analysis to see what's happening in these situations. And we do something similar when it's an interpersonal conflict. So there are different types of conflicts. There is a system conflict within the system, within the way the departments run, the different structure of the organization. The conflict in those situations are telling us something is going on. We need to rethink, we need to strategize, we need to man up, we need more people, we need to downgrade, our system is big, maybe we don't have enough capacity in the system. So then that's a different kind of response to a conflict in those conflict situations. But when we go into interpersonal conflicts, and often we see that the system conflict can breed a lot more interpersonal conflicts and disputes. So you have to ask yourself that when you're at work, is this a systems conflict that's filtrating down into interpersonal conflict, causing us to disagree and creating a situation where our needs and interests are competing, right? So you may be departmentally competing for the same dollars, competing for the same clients. So that's where you might be asking yourself, what is going on here? Why are we in conflict? This is the first thing you're going to do when you are recognizing a conflict. And so when I go in to resolve a conflict, the first thing I want to do is to analyze, do an analysis. What is going on and why are the parties experiencing difficulty at this time? And sometimes it could be that we are not necessarily seeing things the same. One of the things I often say in my books and in my work is that we should plan how to resolve conflicts before they occur. We wait too long. Often we are catching up and trying to figure out what is our conflict style and how do I feel emotionally when conflict happens. We should actually be preparing to resolve conflict, because I can guarantee you will face conflict at some point in your time, in your life, whether in your career, whether it's with your subordinate, whether it's your superior, whether it's with your organization or interdepartmentally, you may at some point experience conflict. And so it's very important to preempt that and to recognize some of the symptoms that can happen and why conflicts are occurring. We always ask that question. Why is the conflict occurring? So why is it important then to resolve conflict? And we could go all on and say, oh, well, we'll just let the conflict happen. And sometimes leaders will say to me, Joyce, do I have to intervene? And I say, yes, there is a point to intervene. And I'll cover that later when we go through the conflict progression cycle. But first, let's talk about why we should resolve conflict. First, because when we do so, it fuels collaboration. We're removing distraction. When you are in conflict, it's very hard to collaborate with that other person, because all you're going to think about because conflict stirs up a lot of emotions in us. I say sometimes conflict is very unreasonable. It makes us behave unreasonably because our emotions, we become so emotionally entwined in the conflict. Our identity get bound up in those interpersonal conflicts, and we seldom are able to pause and ask and do that analysis, that self-analysis. And we'll delve a little bit into some things that we can do to prepare ourselves. And someone said here, the generational work ethic differences, younger employees versus older employees. And that is true. We're seeing a lot of that happening, right? Having to call out clients about their weaknesses. Ooh, now those are all really good conflicts here. And I'm looking at those interdepartmental, and we'll go through some of those and pull out some scenarios because I want you, and I'll share some case studies if we have time at the end when we're going to questions, but I want to actually resolve your conflict, your situations that you're facing, and give you tools to go back and be able to apply. So one of the key things why we want to resolve conflict is also increasing the positive work environment. There is nothing worse than being in an environment where it is heavy and toxic, and you're bowed down and overwhelmed because of the conflict that's happening. So creating opportunities for innovation, reducing emotional stress and fatigue. That is one of the biggest one that employees tell me, Joyce, the conflicts are too much. It's taking away from my energy. It's draining me. And we see that a lot in conflict situations when we intervene with clients. In the biology of conflict, which I talk about in my book, we know that when conflict occur, we go into that fight or flight response. And that's because the oxygen that we usually go into a brain. So now we're talking and teaching, we're interacting, and there is a healthy amount of oxygen going into flowing into the bloodstream, and the blood flow to the brain is normal and healthy. So I can think clearly, I can rationalize, we can think about the types of situations we're facing. But what happens when there is a conflict, our body change, our biology, physiologically, we respond differently. So there's a physiological change that we go through. There is more blood flow that goes to our muscles and less to the brain. So we're not thinking as clearly, as critically and rationally about the situation. That's why it's very important to not hasten conflict resolution. Because if you try to hasten it, you're not equipped with the right tools. You don't have the ability to execute and pull on those higher execution abilities that we have to resolve conflict fluently and appropriately. When the oxygen is shut off to our brain, we're getting just enough to function. It's not enough for us to delve into critical or rational thinking, or even to be analytical if we chose to be. So what happens then is we are more prone to run, right? Because that's our primitive brain, right? You run, right? The saber-tooth tiger is coming, so you're running for your life because it's that fear, that adrenaline and cortisol bursting through your system. And so you want to fight to save your life, right? And so we tend to want to be, and that's why you see in workplaces, people get physical. There's shoving, there's yelling, there is a pushing sometimes, there's confrontation, because people are not using that rational brain, that higher execution of thought. And we see really smart, brilliant people at the point of that really high conflict are acting very irrationally. And this is what happens when we look at the biology of conflict. So what we want to do then is look at why conflict expands, because what we want to do is to be able to apply those proper interpersonal skills, apply those critical thinking skills, generate ideal options, better options, other ideas. Because when we think when we have no more ideas and we've run out of ideas, we make choices that are not best, and we may be going ahead with inappropriate responses to the conflict. We want to be able to acquire new perspectives. And that's why we take that pause, right? Between stimulus and response, there is that pause that we take so we can start breathing again, taking in deep breath, clearing our minds, and letting the blood flow up to the central lobe, so we can start thinking critically and responding to the conflict at hand appropriately. And this happens for all of us, regardless of your conflict style, right? This is a biological piece that has occurred. And this is one of the things that we can do, because there are such a thing as conflict styles. Some of us are different. We have different personalities. And based on our personalities, we may have different response styles to conflict, right? We may respond to conflict from different perspectives. We may be responding to conflict. Maybe we're responding to conflict from a competitive point of view, right? Or others. So let's take a look at some of the conflict styles that, generally speaking, is popular in the world of conflict resolution, and look at where you fall. So accommodating is one of the style where you are forgoing your desire, you're being selfless, you have the ability to yield to the other person's needs and interests at the expense of yours. So in the chat, tell me if that's you. If you're an accommodator, put accommodating in the chat. The next one is the compromiser. The compromiser always looking for middle ground. And it's saying, let's agree on this. Let's work this out. I'm sure there is a way that we could come to some agreements, right? While the accommodator is saying, whatever you want, I'm okay with that, right? So where are you? Are you an accommodator? Are you a compromiser? Where are you sitting? Then, of course, there are the competitors who are saying, you do what you want me to do? What? Never mind that, right? And so the competitors are arguing, they're debating, they're in your face. They want to tell you why you should and why you should. And so they are the competitors, and they are not sitting back quietly accommodating or wanting to compromise. So where do you sit? It all depends on who am I in conflict with and the situation. You know what? It can be situational. However, if you don't have the right emotional intelligence, we notice that people who we thought would have been really good in a conflict situation are not. And as we become more intelligent, emotionally intelligent, we're recognizing definitely there are some things we shouldn't do at work. However, we see, yes, there are the avoiders. Yes, they're like, what conflict? There is no conflict happening here. I did not say that. This is not. So much so that sometimes I would be called in by the director to say, Joyce, we have a conflict going on in this department, and I need you to do a mediation between the departments. So here are the contact information. I reach out to the leaders, and they're like, oh no, there's no conflict happening here. We have a situation, but it's not a conflict, right? So yes, they're very fearful of conflicts because they will need to make a choice or take a stand, or they don't want to, right? Some people just have that real anxiety around conflict. And so it's challenging for them to be able to, though for those folks, it's even more important to take time to rationalize what's going on and to think about what they're going to do. And Diane said I could use any of these styles. I want to say I'm collaborating for most part, but when it comes to my husband, I will have, oh, well, we will do another one on conflict with husbands. I have one too. Okay, so mix between accommodating and avoiding. Deep competitor would feel the need to compassion. Absolutely. You could be a competitor, but if you have good emotional intelligence, you are better able to move your styles around. Once you become knowledgeable of the styles, you can do a quick self-check and say, which style am I using? Which is appropriate at this time? And then, of course, are the collaborators. Oh. The collaborators wants to merge insight. They want to have a talk about it. They want to get into it. They want to understand your point. And they are they require time and energy. And most people, although collaborating is one of the preferred and most highly recommended response to conflict, most people shy away from collaborating because they say it takes time, it takes energy, it's requiring too much, but it actually is not that bad. The time management piece of it, it's if we consider it an investment in an understanding. And so with technology and with AI, we can do so much more in advance. We could send a letter, we could send an email message, we could write a response, we could do so much more with technology now to start getting people think. We can send them documents ahead of time to read. We could start writing proposed ideas on how we're going to put all our thoughts together. So you can make it. We've been able now to shorten the collaborating time. So the collaborators are people who really are interested about the needs and interests of all parties, and they want to come to consensus. They want to bring people to the table to get at this understanding, they want to build empathy and create a sense of satisfaction. Because what often happens is that when we're not using a collaborating style, and there are different styles for different situations, depending on the types of conflicts, who's involved, multi-parties versus, one person, two people conflict versus multilateral conflicts. So what we see is looking at, as an analyst, we look at what is the conflict on the table, what is the best situation to handle it, and how do we work through it? How do we support those parties in coming up with a solution that's beneficial for them? And that's really the best way to go about it. Let's talk a little bit about conflict resolution. So we have I'm going to pause and take a look at some of our comments here. We have some comments and we have some Q&A, because there's nothing I hate more than going to a webinar and they just talk at me. I want to speak with you, because we need to dialogue in order for us to be able to respond to conflict effectively. So here's what we just hear here. How do I motivate a senior leader who is cruel and shaming? Oh. They believe it's a great way to teach because it works fabulously. People don't confront them anymore because it isn't worth the abuse. As a consultant, they don't have an internal boss accountability, but is so valuable to the organization. We fear their departure, so we tolerate the high staff turnover. I share the direct cost of this individual, but they aren't buying it. They feel it's staff's problem. Chef should toughen up and be, we need to get them to do the, they need help. Okay, so if someone is abusing, there is a difference between bringing awareness to someone and abusing another person. And there is no conflict resolution. There is really being nasty is not a way of resolving conflict. For instance, when employees are not doing well, for instance, you have an employee who's not performing or an employee who's not being accountable, we encourage you to use more of a coaching framework to dialogue with that person. For instance, Sally she's not meeting her quotas. She's not doing well at work. You want to invite her to a dialogue. Sally, can we sit down and talk about why I'm seeing this, and help me understand where we go from here. So you set up a time, and we're going to talk about purpose stating, because this is so very important and can be a real game changer in the emotional and the well-being of employees. And 20 years ago, when I was doing this work, we talked about mental health being one of the second highest cause of workplace disability. Now, by 2020, guess what? We're in 2024. And it is, and all of us in our lifetime will have a mental health episode. What is going to differ is how intense it is, how long it is, how difficult it is to pass through, to get through it. So we do need to be careful. We do need to be respectful of others, and we do need to pay attention to other people's feelings, even when they are not doing well. And often when we teach respectful workplace, we say respect is not because someone earns it, it's a dignity that we afford to others. So it's very important. It doesn't matter what value someone brings to your organization. If they're destroying your people, then they're of no value, because your people are the asset in your organization. There is no other rationale. If they are detrimental to the emotional and mental well-being of your employees, then they're not actually valuable to your organization. You may be looking at value from one end, but you're missing the impact on the other. Because not only some are going to leave, some are going to shut down, some are going to ignore, some are going to become some are going to go into themselves, and we're going to see things like compassion fatigue and burnout and mental health. So we have to be very, very careful with conflicts when they occur in our organizations. It's an opportunity. Conflict is a catalyst for change. And the way we resolve conflict is by listening, paraphrasing, reframing, purpose stating. We want to share ideas. We want to bring people to the table. Having someone in a leadership position that you're paying as a consultant to bring into your organization who is shaming everyone and abusing everyone, I'm sorry, I cannot see the value to that. So we want to collaborate, we want to negotiate. And if that person doesn't want to do so, then they're not the right fit for your organization, especially in caregiving and healthcare, where there is such a burden these days, where there is so much more put on your employees than ever before. You should not be putting internal stresses on them. So that's how I would suggest I would respond to that piece that I was just reading in the chat. And so yes, please do put them. I will be going in every few minutes and pulling one to talk. Red flags, I try to protect as many people as possible. You do need, sometimes we need to do, sometimes we do like a circle where we bring people together and almost like an impact. We do that conflict impact session where we bring the people who are being impacted, the people who are being hurt and abused, and we bring them together with the perpetrator to talk about how it feels, because some people are so desensitized that they're not able to identify how their impact is emotionally affecting others. So that's one of the other option I would suggest for a situation like that. So when we listen, we have to remember that people will listen when you show them respect, meaning you are willing to listen to them. If someone is in a leadership, he's the CEO, we can check him too. Like, yeah. If someone is in a leadership position, they should definitely learn how to resolve conflict. Right? When we accuse and blame, we are not showing understanding. We're not showing respect. We're not showing dignity for that person. We need to check our attitudes. We need to share our interests and needs. We need to show understanding, check for agreement, and address their concerns and interests in a healthy way. We cannot be, we have to be the change we want in the organization. Show respect for what the person has to say, waiting for the person to complete their statement before speaking. Keeping looking in the direction of the person, even not, some cultures are we don't want you, or they feel comfortable, or it's not part of the culture to look at that person's in the eye, where it is for some, whatever is comfortable for you, but at least you're facing that person, you're in that same room, you're showing that you're physically listening, and you're either nodding your head or you're contemplating, you're making notes, and then you listen to more than just the words. Listen for the emotions. Look at people and you can see their body language. When you talk to people and they share their burdens, you can see if that person is open, if that person is closed, if that person is really hurting. And some people can hide it and we can't necessarily see, but it's important to be open to at least being aware of what they're feeling and experiencing so that you can support them. It's managing your words in conflict is very, very important. We need to manage our words. Non-confrontational, meaning that I want to understand you. Can we talk a little bit more about this? Can you share some information? I mean, we are in the days of Google now. We can even ask that person, is there a blog, or have you read anything lately that can shed light on your situation and what you're experiencing that you could share with me, right? Invite dialogue. This is what generates trust. In a workplace, we need to trust each other, because when there is low trust in the workplace, our brain is overly excited, because that sense of fear and distrust is creating a lot of cortisol in our system, adrenaline. And so we're not working from a place of, in a place of good health. It's creating more stress in our system, right? Elicit that collaboration. Ask people to dialogue with you. Ask them to participate. Instead of saying you want to pick a fight with me, say, this is not a good time to discuss this. Can we look at arranging a better time? It's those little things, those little pieces that we can do. Yes, we can parse our statement. Yes, we can put our statements through ChatGPT and ask it to make it better. Yes, absolutely. We can do that. And we have so much at our fingertips now. We should be doing better with our whole working situation. But I know a lot happens. People get tired, people get busy, people get overwhelmed. And I know in the whole field of health and well-being, we see a lot of the challenges. But I want to share with you one of the pieces I did. And this is in my book. And I'm going to share the link with you where you could actually go and get it, because I want you to be able to get access to this. So I'm going to put the link in the chat for you. So this is actually in my last book, I wrote a piece on, my last book is called Hurt, Upset, Angry, Frustrated. And I'm going to share this chapter with you. This chapter of my book is, if you go to this page on our website and you scroll all the way down to the bottom, just under my signature, it will say a webinar gift, download the webinar book from me. And in this book, you will be able to see the chapter 3 that I'm going to talk about. It's the escalation of conflict. And it really talks about why conflict escalates and how we go into different phases and how we can change the conflict in our workplaces. So what I did in this piece is I used one of the models that I use for conflict analysis, and I break it down, and I'm sharing this with you. There are 3 stages of conflict progression. The first stage of conflict progression is where you are in a situation and you start to recognize, you know what? Interacting with this person just doesn't make me feel, it doesn't make me feel good. It really bugs me. It's making me feel uncomfortable. And as we do that, we start to think, what is going on? And you will notice in the chapter when you do get it, and you don't have to go get it right now, but just save this link and you'll get it, because I don't want you missing. In that first phase of the conflict, and we call it the conceptual phase, in the book, I call it, you make me feel horrible. In this phase, you're going to start experiencing strong emotions when somebody comes in the room, when they're interacting with you, and this is where you are starting to recognize a interpersonal conflict with someone. And this is that conceptual phase of the conflict, right? This is where you might be in maybe an outright disagreement with that person, or they've said something or done something that caused you to feel hurt, anger, suspicion, resentment, anxiety, frustration, distrust. Yeah, your body was speaking so loudly that you needed to get out of the situation. Yeah, with your boss. This is unfortunate when it happens with a superior or a subordinate, somebody you work with directly, because this is not a healthy interaction. However, we're humans and these things happen. So it's very important for us to recognize when that's happened. If you're a conflict avoider, you will tend to say, oh, I'm just going to get over it. And that's good if you can, right? Avoiding works sometimes for some conflicts, but not for all, right? If you can, get over it. And if you can, then that's great. But if you cannot, then you need to do something about it. In this conceptual phase, you have to start thinking, what is going to happen if this continues? Sometimes you can avoid, you're right, you can avoid for a while, but sometimes it just comes to a head. And sometimes we think we are avoiding, but we really are not. And this is when the conflict start goes up into what we call the consensual phase. So it goes from the conceptual phase one. This is where we're feeling that anger, that upset, that resentment, lack of trust. The central phase happens when, humans are very interesting creatures. When we're feeling something or we're experiencing something, we like to get someone to affirm us. So I'm going to go to my best friend. I'm going to say, you know what? I don't know. This Sally just doesn't, she really gets on my nerves. And this is what she did. She was gossiping about me. Oh, she didn't send the report on time. And guess what? Your friend who really loves you or works with you or sympathize or maybe had an incident with Sally before may say, oh, you too. Oh, yes, yes. And it happened to Joan. She did it with Harry. And yeah, she did it with Becky too. And all of a sudden, we now have what we call conflict alignment, which is where more that interpersonal engagement, interaction, conflict has now moved up one level into the central phase and has create alignment where groups of individuals are now upset with that person. And now that person is saying, oh, what's going on? Sally isn't talking to me, Harry isn't talking to me, Becky. So going to now tell their group of friends or colleagues, you won't believe what's happening. I just went there and they started, oh, they did that to you too. They did that. And all of a sudden you start happening. And then people start taking sides and people want to defend each other. And if that's not resolved in the central phase, now in the book we talk about, on page 23, we talk a little bit about what usually shows up: outrage, alignment, distrust, discord, miscommunication, gossip, rumors, stereotypes, discrimination, work disruption, distractions, and allegiances, right? We are going to take our allegiance to certain parties and not with others. So when these things start happening, it's very important for us to, this is where it now moves into protracted phase, because if it's not resolved in that phase, most of the times we see clients coming to us for the central phase where the alignment has gone on and it's getting a little bit testy. Because if you don't, it's going to go to the protracted phase. And in the protracted phase, it gets really nasty, because that's where we see things happening like destructiveness start to set in. And people start to dehumanize each other, right? You're no longer a human, so it's okay. Somebody can run you over with their car in the parking lot because you're not human. And yes, people think and say those things and do those things. This is when we let conflict progress into that protracted phase. We dehumanize the other. We create negative competition, sabotage, hate crimes, historical and cyclical disputes. And we see many of them happening in global situations, right? Ethnic cleansing. We see terrible violence and a desire to cause harm or to annihilate the other. So where people are so upset and so angry at each other that they're going to do things to cause the other person to get fired, get the other person to get in trouble, hurt, violate, violence, and that's protracted conflict, because we no longer see the other person as a person. We see them, we dehumanize them, and we devalue them as a person. And this is what happens when we let conflict go on too long. That's why it's very important for us to spend time speaking with others, asking people what's going on. How can I be part of the solution? Where do we go from here? How can we change this? And one of the pieces that's very popular that we teach a lot in my work is purpose statement. Identify the purpose for the communication or the issues of interest you want to discuss. I want to discuss this. Can we talk about this? And one of the pieces that I've done in my work and one of the research that I've noticed is that there are certain types of people who get into conflict more than others. These are people who are not doing well, people who are struggling in some areas of their lives. And so we talk about the interpersonal wellness, the whole conflict situation is when we move beyond conflict and we start to do that deeper analysis to see what's going on. And many times when we check in with these clients, they are not doing well in one of these dimensions. And so what we're looking at is moving beyond the conflict and creating a deeper understanding of what's happening for people. This is where individuals are not doing well spiritually, socially, emotionally, occupationally, intellectually, environmentally, financially, and physically. And I forgot to say to you that I have a coupon where you can assess, and that's your gift just for purely for being here today. I'm going to give you, this is a paid assessment, but you're going to get a coupon that allows you 100% access to take the assessment, the one-time assessment. So I want to give you that as a gift. So you can start thinking about how well you're doing. Because in my research, I've seen, and I've written books on this, that many times when people are not doing well in one of these areas, spiritually, socially, emotionally, occupationally, intellectually, environmentally, financially, physically, interpersonally, they tend to have more conflicts. They tend to be those ones who bully others. They tend to be the ones who are absolutely insensitive to others' feelings. And they tend to be the ones who cause more of the friction at work. So I want to invite you to take an assessment of where you are, how you're doing in these areas, and make the changes you need so you can be the change you want to be at work. Because you come here today because you're struggling with conflicts that are impacting your lives, your work. Every day we have to go to work. We have to go to work every day. And if we're not doing well, we're going to show up at work unwell and we're going to cause conflict for others. So I'm going to jump through. Oh, let me drop the the code. This is where you go to get the assessment. I'm going to drop the link and I'm going to go into a Q&A so we can answer the questions, and I'm going to drop the code. Let me do that right now in here for you so you can see. I'm going to go into the Q&A, answer those questions, and I'm going to drop the code. So you can go right here and you can, that's my gift to you, and do with it as you may. It's a one-time code. When you go there, you're going to see a one-time assessment for $49.99, I believe. And you put this coupon in here, it's going to let you do the assessment for free. And you're going to, instead of putting in a credit card, you can put this coupon in, and it should give you 100% access. So you can assess how well you're doing in those areas. And when you do so, it's going to give you a full report. It's going to tell you how you're doing. It's going to identify how well you're doing in those areas. Pay attention and do some work on yourself so that you can be at a better place to handle the situation, because work is going to become even more challenging because we're so diverse. We have so many needs. We're doing more with less. There are less resources. There are more challenges. There are more different generations at work. All of these issues are not going to go away. What we need to do, though, is get ourselves ready. Remember I said we should start, right? Getting ready to resolve conflict. Let me answer your question. I love your advice on how to chat with employees who blatantly sit in their phones and take extended breaks when they're supposed to be working. Avoid conflict. So we're short on bodies. They know I'm not going to fire them. I'm dealing these conflict interactions. So the answer to this question, you have an employee who is sitting on the phone on their break. Are they on their break? Their phones and taking extended breaks. So you're going to invite that employee. You're going to say, Sally, when is your break, and when do you, how much time do you actually take for your break? Is there a way that we can you can take just your time so we can ensure that you're back on time for the other person who needs to take their break? Because sometimes people get so bogged down, overwhelmed, they stop thinking about others. Because remember, you don't know what's going on for your employees at work. They may be going through financial challenges. They may be fighting with their spouses. They may be going through divorces. They may be having family conflicts. They may be having all kinds of things. And so when they are behaving in a particular way, it's important for us to ask ourselves, I wonder what's going on for that person right now, why they needed to extend their break. And is this a pattern? If this is a pattern, then you need to have a frank conversation. Say, Sally, I noticed that you take a longer break than is given in our contract or clause, right? The breaks are 15 minutes, and I noticed that you're taking 25 or half an hour. This is just an example. I have no clue what time your breaks are. Is it possible to stick to the time frame? And if not, how can we make that happen for you or with you? What is it we need to do to help you to do that? And they may come up and say they don't. And sometimes they may resist and say, well, I didn't take my break last week. I only take it this week today because I miss it. I said, well, then we need to discuss that in advance. On the days that you don't take break, please note it and send me an email with those dates and times so we can put it in the schedule so you can get those times. Because if we don't schedule it and you just go and take it on your own, then it's going to affect everyone else. And is that ability to think of others, right? Competing needs and interests. That's when we talk about conflict. Someone says not sharing information. Another question, do you have additional resources for training staff on how to handle confrontational behavior? Do I have resources? I have books and pieces, and yes, I do have courses and workshops and training, and we have group coaching programs, all that we do for helping employees to do. We do a big piece on them being able to use purpose stating and how to apply purpose stating in their interaction with others to prevent conflict. And we do a coaching piece around that so that the actual training sticks. So yes, we do that. When the perpetrator deeply stressed out, and this is question time, we're almost at that time. How do you recommend responding when someone is taking competitive stance during a conflict with you and you feel overwhelmed by the intensity and not being heard? There are times where we just have to say to a person, we just have to put our hands up for peace and say, can we talk about this at another time? At this point, I don't think that I can rationally discuss this with you. Let me think about it. Let me have time to sleep on it. And then we can talk about it. We can set a time to talk about it. It's very important. And we do a lot of pieces around coaching those conflict responses, coaching and conflict. A lot of work I did on pre-mediation back a couple decades ago that we continue to do. So those are some of the pieces that we do. I want to just share with you, if you haven't yet seen my contact information, you can just snip it here. And you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn or via email if you're looking for additional resources. The first page I sent you with the book, you can look at. It shows you all the different chapters in the book. We do workshops and training on all of those pieces as well. So that's another resource that you could look at. And on that page, you'll see a range of different training that we do around the whole well-being competencies, because well-being is, we want to have well-being at work, and well-being is being in an environment where there are fewer conflicts, where we're more collaborative, we're more innovative. And that is so important in today's day and age where we're trying to protect our mental health. So I do want to acknowledge your time and want to respect it. And so I want to ensure that we end on time, but feel free to connect with me for any further questions or resources or tools, because we do have a range of those available. Thank you so much.